The term workflow is used to describe how the laboratory is set up into different work areas and the procedures and systems that enable the people in the facility to carry out their work efficiently and safely. It's important that the workflow at the facility reduces the risk of staff being exposed to biological agents being released outside the laboratory, and cross-contamination. Before any work begins in a laboratory facility, a workflow plan should be in place. The plan should be discussed with staff so that everyone understands their roles and responsibilities and how the work will be organized, from receiving samples through to reporting results. Laboratory design and setup are important factors for good workflow. The equipment and materials needed for particular tasks should be close at hand, and there needs to be sufficient and well-organized space so that staff can work without getting in each other's way. It's best practice to have a one-way flow of work. For example, an area at one end of the laboratory to receive samples, which would lead into an area for initial processing, then on to further analysis and checking of results, and finally to disposal of waste. It's important to note that different processing procedures can have adverse effects on each other. For example, the cultivation of live biological agents could contaminate samples being processed for PCR, potentially creating false positive results. So these types of processes should not be carried out in the same area. Within a laboratory, separation of conflicting activities may be achieved by having designated areas on workbenches. These could be marked out using tape and labelled. There are some activities that should ideally be carried out in separate laboratories or rooms. Examples include primary sample collection, media and some reagent preparation, molecular techniques such as PCR, cultivation of biological agents, and autoclaving. Where possible, separate reagents and equipment should be used to avoid cross-contamination. For example, separate dedicated bottles of a buffer solution should be used for work involving live cultures and molecular methods. Here, a color coding system is being used to make identification easier. Ideally, there should be enough storage space, on shelving and in cupboards and drawers, to keep the working areas clear. Organize the laboratory space so that any regularly used items, such as spare boxes of pipette tips, are stored in drawers or cupboards near to the work area. Avoid storing items on shelving above the microbiology work area, as any dust that settles there can be dislodged and contaminate the work surface. Floors should not be used as storage areas and should be kept clear of everything, except waste bins if they're needed. Before starting work, the workspace should be clean and tidy. If possible, keep the surface clear of everything except the items needed to complete the task at hand, and keep these items towards the back of the bench to ensure you have enough room to work at the front. It's difficult to work well in a messy environment. It can lead to cross-contamination and accidents, which may expose laboratory staff to biological agents. Work cannot flow smoothly without the right equipment and supplies. There should be procedures in place to make sure that equipment is checked regularly and properly maintained. Supplies such as PPE, reagents, and stocks of biological agents and chemicals must be stored correctly. A log and regular stock check must be in place to ensure there are enough supplies to do the work. Before starting any work, the information received with the sample should be checked to ensure it is present and correct, and has been logged into the system. The sample should be clearly labelled to ensure it cannot be confused with other samples. Where multiple analyses are required on the same sample, the procedures must be carried out in the right order, and if any subsamples need to be taken from the primary sample, this should be agreed before processing starts. Before processing the sample, make sure that the workspace is available, clean and tidy, and that reagents and other supplies are prepared and close to hand. Sign-off may be required for certain procedures prior to moving on to the next phase of the work. This will be useful for tracking the journey of the sample. When you've finished the procedure, you should tidy up and clean the area before moving on to the next process. To avoid confusion and misplaced samples, clear communication with colleagues will be required before sending the sample to a different department. Some samples may require storage after processing. Some may go straight to waste disposal. And some may be destroyed during sample processing, for example, DNA extraction for molecular analysis. In any of these instances, the fate of the sample should be recorded so that the sample journey through the facility can be tracked. Where samples need to be stored, the type, location and duration of storage should be agreed and recorded. Analyzing and reporting results of tests should be standardized to avoid confusion and miscommunication. Data and reports should be checked for potential errors before they are provided to the customer or service user. Data and reports should also be stored for an agreed period of time, in case they need to be revisited, and for auditing purposes. Good communications and sufficient numbers of well-trained staff are important factors at every stage of the process, from design and planning through to delivering results. If these important provisions are not properly implemented, it's difficult to work safely and produce reliable results. In summary, good workflow includes a workflow plan that details what work will be carried out, when and where it will be done, and who will be responsible. Sufficient clean and tidy workspaces. Designated rooms or segregated areas for specific procedures. Appropriate storage of consumables and equipment. A one-way flow of work to avoid cross-contamination of samples. Standardized methods. Sample tracking. And clear communication between staff.